This is a story I've only ever whispered to my therapist, and even then, I watched her face carefully, searching for judgment. Most days, I almost convinced myself it was just pressure, isolation, and the deep sea madness. But some nights, the hum of the ocean deep returns, and I know the truth. It happened 2 years ago. My name is David. I was a structural engineer, or rather, I had been. A botched project, a series of bad choices, and then the lawsuit hit. I was facing financial ruin, legal battles, and the specter of losing everything, including my daughter's future. Desperation, pure and unadulterated, made me look for any way out. That's when I found the ad. It was buried deep in a specialized forum. High-level subsea engineering contract, uncharted territory, extreme compensation, immediate start. No company name, just a secure email. I sent my resume, half expecting it to vanish into the digital void. The response was immediate. A video call with a woman named Dr. Eris Thorne. Her face was grim, her eyes sharp, and she spoke in clipped, precise sentences. The project was an experimental deep-sea drilling platform in an uncharted trench. The pay was astronomical, enough to make my legal problems disappear. The red flags were waving like distress signals, but desperation has a way of turning them into welcome banners. I took the job. The journey was long, first by military-grade transport plane, then by a massive cargo ship. As we steamed further out, the ocean transformed from blue to an inky, oppressive black. The air grew heavy with the scent of salt and fuel. The rig, when we finally reached it, was unlike anything I'd ever seen. Not a typical oil platform, but a sleek, almost alien structure designed to plunge directly into the abyssal depths. It was called the Leviathan II. Dr. Thorne met us on the main deck. She had a cold, intense aura, and she quickly laid out the rules, not just for safety, but for something else entirely. She handed each of us a laminated card with cryptic protocols, guidelines that went far beyond the scope of engineering best practices. Rule 1. Never vent pressure from the main drill head if the sonar detects large, non-biological anomalies. A steady pressure means a steady containment. Rule 2. Any unexpected bioluminescence outside the rig's lights must be reported immediately to Dr. Thorne or the lead engineer. Do not acknowledge it visually or verbally beyond reporting. Do not stare. Rule 3. If the seismic monitors detect rhythmic thrumming from the ocean floor, immediately raise all drill bits and retract to safety depth. Do not proceed, regardless of orders from command. This rule overrides all others. Rule 4. If you feel a pull or a whisper from the depths while working outside the rig, e.g. during sub-maintenance, cut the tether and return inside immediately. Do not resist the initial impulse to cut. Do not look down into the void. Rule 5. All communication with the surface is logged and strictly controlled. No unauthorized broadcasts. Information security is paramount. Rule 6. The rig's main lights must always be on, regardless of power consumption. The light is not just for visibility. My first few weeks were a relentless grind of engineering work. The pressure of the deep was immense, almost palpable, and the constant hum of the rig's machinery was a relentless presence. But beneath that, there was a deeper hum, a resonant vibration that seemed to come from the very core of the earth. We were drilling, not for oil, but for samples of what Dr. Thorne vaguely referred to as geological anomalies and unique thermal vents. I noticed subtle things, sonar pings that were quickly dismissed as system glitches, but I saw the flicker of something enormous, non-biological, moving far below us. The core samples we brought up sometimes contained strange, impossible minerals that glowed faintly, and Dr. Thorne would personally handle them, her face unusually tight. The crew, a mix of hardened veterans and young hotshots, grew increasingly quiet. They'd stare out into the inky blackness, their faces pale, their eyes vacant. Some began muttering about voices from the deep, or about something ancient waking up. Dr. Thorne just worked harder, her eyes constantly on the monitors, her fingers flying over keyboards. Then came the bioluminescence. I was on a maintenance run in one of the submersibles, inspecting the drill head. Suddenly, hundreds of feet below me, the water exploded in a riot of impossible blues and greens, pulsing with an unnatural rhythm. It wasn't plankton. These were vast, swirling patterns, forming and dissolving like impossible glyphs. Rule 2 screamed in my head. Do not acknowledge it visually or verbally beyond reporting. Do not stare. My eyes were glued to it, a terrifying beauty that pulled at my mind. I reported it, my voice shaking, and Thorne's voice, cold and precise over the comms, ordered me back immediately. The real terror began when we hit what Thorne called the target zone. The drill bits whined under impossible pressure. And then, the seismic monitors went wild. Not an earthquake. A rhythmic thrumming, deep and resonant, like a vast, slow heartbeat from the very core of the planet. Rule 3. Immediately raise all drill bits and retract to safety depth. This rule overrides all others. Thorne's face was chalk white. She issued the order, her voice tight, overriding a frantic command voice coming over the comms, demanding we push through. She was following the rules, but as the drill bit slowly retracted, the thrumming grew louder, more insistent. I was working outside the rig, on a tether, trying to clear a jam in one of the auxiliary thrusters, when I felt it. A distinct pull from the absolute depths below. It wasn't currents. It was a conscious mental tug, accompanied by a chorus of whispers that echoed not in my ears, but directly in my mind. They weren't words, but concepts. Release. Join. Remember. It was a vast, ancient hunger. Rule 4. Cut the tether and return inside immediately. Do not resist the initial impulse to cut. My hands, numb with cold and fear, fumbled for the safety release. The pull was immense, almost irresistible, trying to draw me down into the eternal black. I heard my daughter's laughter, a desperate memory, and that gave me the strength to sever the tether. I was reeled in, gasping, shaking, the phantom whispers still echoing in my skull. Back inside, chaos was erupting. Some crew members were slamming their fists against the viewing ports, their faces contorted, screaming about the voices. Others just stood, staring blankly at the monitors, their eyes fixed on the thrumming seismic data, a placid, terrifying smile on their faces. They were lost. Thorne, her eyes burning with a desperate fury, was furiously trying to reroute power, to boost the main lights. "It's trying to get in," she screamed, pointing at the data. "It wants us to see it, to feel it." The realization slammed into me. We weren't drilling for resources. We were drilling for a prison wall, and we had cracked it. What was below was ancient, vast, and it hungered not for oil, but for consciousness, for the living, thinking beings who had disturbed its millennia of slumber. The previous team hadn't vanished. They had been absorbed. The rig began to shudder violently. Not mechanical failure. It felt like something was trying to pull it down. Lights flickered, emergency alarms blared. Thorne, making a desperate decision, activated the rig's emergency ascent protocols, cutting the drilling lines. The Leviathan 2, groaning and protesting, slowly began to rise. The ascent was a nightmare. The thrumming grew to an unbearable crescendo, vibrating through the entire structure. Crew members were pressing themselves against the metal bulkheads, their faces serene, translucent, eyes reflecting the impossible light from below. They were becoming one with the rig, one with the consciousness trying to consume us. I saw Thorne, strapped into the command chair, her face a mask of grim determination, fighting the automated systems, fighting the pull. She was sacrificing the rig, risking everything just to get us out. We broke the surface at dawn, battered and half destroyed, the rig's experimental systems fried. Many crew members were catatonic, unresponsive, their eyes blank, murmuring about the deep. Thorne herself collapsed once we were stable, her face pale, her spirit utterly broken. The official report was catastrophic equipment failure due to unforeseen geological pressures, and a tragic loss of personnel due to the extreme environment. The rig was towed back, disassembled, its secrets buried. The catatonic crew members were institutionalized, their conditions attributed to deep-sea psychosis. Thorne herself vanished from the scientific community, her career apparently ended. But I know the truth. I still feel the phantom pull sometimes, a cold pressure in my mind, urging me to look down. I still hear the whispers, and I know that somewhere, in that uncharted trench, something ancient and terrible is still thrumming, a vast intelligence waiting patiently. We didn't drill for oil, we opened a door, and the deep, I now understand, is far from empty. It's just waiting to be fed. This is a confession, I guess. Not to the cops, not to anyone who can put me back in a cell. This is for me, and for anyone who might stumble upon this account. My name is Alex. A couple of years ago, I made a very big mistake. A bad gamble, a desperate move, and I ended up on the wrong side of some very unpleasant people. I needed to disappear, and I needed cash, fast, with no questions asked. That's how I found the ad online. Night attendant, Crossroads Bus Depot, cash pay, no background check, isolated location. It was perfect, too perfect. My gut screamed, but my mounting desperation, the heavy weight of my past pressing down on me, drowned it out. I needed a ghost life, and this seemed like the place to find it. The journey was a blur of anonymous buses and small-town stops, each one feeling like a step further away from the world I knew. Finally, in the dead of night, the bus dropped me off at what could barely be called a depot. It was just a single, dilapidated building at a desolate junction, surrounded by endless, whispering farmland. The air was thick with the smell of diesel and damp earth. A single, flickering fluorescent light illuminated the peeling paint of the Crossroads sign. The manager, a man named Silas, was waiting for me. He was gaunt, his face a web of deep lines, and his eyes, even in the dim light, were disturbingly sharp, watchful. He didn't offer a handshake, just a curt nod and a gesture inside. The depot itself was ancient, smelling of dust and forgotten journeys. A few rows of plastic chairs, a cracked linoleum floor, and a large swinging door leading to the bus bays. Silas didn't waste time on pleasantries. He handed me a single yellowed sheet of paper, laminated and worn at the edges. "These are your instructions," he rasped, his voice like gravel. "Follow them." "Exactly. You get paid in cash every morning. No questions from me, none from you." My initial thought was that he was just a quirky old man with an obsession for order. But as I read the list, a chill that had nothing to do with the cool night air seeped into my bones. The rules were specific, precise. Some were bizarre. Some were terrifying in implication. My first few nights were quiet, broken only by the hum of the old fluorescent lights and the distant drone of passing trucks on the unseen highway. I cleaned, I restocked, I tried to convince myself that Silas's rules were just eccentricities. But then, the first unscheduled arrival occurred. It was 2:30 a.m. A bus, ancient and unlit, glided silently into Gate 4. No roar of engine, no hiss of brakes. Just a quiet, ghostly arrival. The door opened with a soft sigh. Passengers began to disembark. They were pale, their clothes archaic, their movements unnaturally fluid, almost dreamlike. Their eyes, when they met mine, were dark, vacant pools that seemed to absorb the light. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced myself to raise an arm, pointing to the waiting chairs. They glided past me, not a sound, not a whisper. They just sat, and they just watched. I cleaned the counter, my back to them, until the clock hit 4 a.m., and they rose, flowed back onto the bus, and it departed as silently as it had arrived. Then, there was the currency. A figure in a long, dark coat approached the counter. His face was obscured by shadow. He pushed a coin across the counter. It wasn't gold, or silver, or copper. It was dull, gray, and etched with symbols I didn't recognize, looking impossibly old. I nodded, my throat tight, and slid the coin into the designated slot under the register, trying desperately not to look at it, a shiver running down my spine as its cold seemed to seep through the wood. The most terrifying nights were when a bus at gate 1 or 2 would pull away, its engine humming, its lights blazing, but the driver's seat was empty. Every fiber of my being screamed to crane my neck to see who or what was driving. But I forced my eyes straight ahead, my hands gripping the counter until the red taillights vanished into the darkness. The silence of the bus departing without a driver was far more chilling than any engine noise. I started seeing the flickering of the overhead lights, subtle at first, then more pronounced, especially when an unscheduled bus was near. It was as if something was pulling at the very electricity, announcing its presence. And the scratching, rhythmic, persistent, from beneath the concrete. It wasn't the building settling. It sounded like something trying to get out. I never investigated, but I could feel it, a cold, hungry presence vibrating through the floor. My desperation, which had once been purely financial, had transformed into a desperate need for survival. I was living by these bizarre rules, knowing that their violation meant something truly awful. I was trapped. One night, the unscheduled bus arrived, and as the passengers moved past me, I heard a faint clatter. A small, tarnished silver locket had fallen from the coat of one of them. My hand instinctively reached for it, to put it in the lost and found box. My fingers brushed the cold metal. As I hesitated, a faint, chilling whisper seemed to coil around me, urging me to pick it up. My eyes drifted to the shadows under the seats, and I saw a glimpse of pale, elongated fingers, beckoning. That was my breaking point. I pulled my hand back as if burned. I ran to the back, grabbed my meager bag, and burst out the back door. I didn't care about the money. I didn't care about the past. I just ran. I ran until my lungs burned, until the first hint of dawn appeared on the horizon, painting the sky in a bruised purple that mirrored my terror. I ran until I found a desolate road and flagged down a bewildered truck driver, incoherent and shivering despite the humid air. The official story? I was a no-show. The bus depot, I heard later, is still there, still running its night shift, still unseen by most. I never found out what happened to Silas. The police, when I finally tried to tell them, dismissed me as a delusional addict. I'm safe now. I paid off my debts, got my life back on track. But I can never truly escape. Sometimes, when the night is too quiet, I hear the faint hum of bus engines that aren't there. I see pale, vacant eyes in the shadows. And I know deep down that the Crossroads Bus Depot isn't just a place where buses stop. It's a gateway. And the things that travel through it are real. And they are still following their rules. And they are still waiting for someone one night to break theirs. This is a story I've never fully recounted before. Not to anyone who truly understood, anyway. My name is Thomas. I'm an architect, or at least I used to be. About 3 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with a rare, aggressive form of cancer. The only hope was an experimental treatment. Hideously expensive. I was drowning in debt, losing my practice, my life. Desperation became my constant companion. Then the email arrived. An anonymous consortium, operating through a very discreet intermediary, offered me a commission that was both insane and, financially, a lifeline. My task, oversee the renovation of an abandoned lighthouse and its surrounding island into an ultra-exclusive off-grid luxury resort. The pay was astronomical, enough to cover Mom's treatment and then some. The catch? I had to live on the island, alone, during the entire winter phase of the project. No direct contact with the owners, only through the intermediary. It was remote, isolated, and utterly mysterious. Every alarm bell screamed, but Mom's fading smile silenced them all. I took the job. The island was off the coast of Maine, a desolate, windswept rock jutting out of the frigid Atlantic. The journey there was by a small, chartered boat, pitching wildly in the choppy November seas. As we approached, the lighthouse loomed, a stark, gray sentinel against the bruised sky, its beacon dark, its glass panes like empty eyes. The old keeper's cottage was boarded up, the resort structures mere skeletons of steel and concrete. It felt less like a project and more like a tomb. The boat left me there with supplies and a satellite phone, disappearing into the mist, leaving me utterly alone. My instructions came in a thick, leather-bound folder, delivered by the intermediary who arrived briefly by helicopter. A gaunt, silent woman who spoke only to confirm the project's parameters before vanishing into the sky. The folder contained blueprints, budgets, and a section titled Structural Integrity Guidelines and Operational Protocols. These weren't standard architectural specifications, they were rules. At first, I dismissed the list as superstition, eccentric legacy nonsense from a bygone age. But as the days passed, I began to understand. The lighthouse's masonry, especially the foundation, felt different. The air near the base was always colder, heavy with a strange pressure. I respected the guidelines, not because I feared the owners, but because something in the stone whispered that I should. The lamp, once repaired, burned steadily each night, and I never let it go out. It wasn't merely illuminating the sea. It was holding something at bay. Then came the scratching. One night during low tide, a rhythmic scraping sound echoed from beneath the island's rocky shoreline. It wasn't the ocean. It wasn't natural. It was slow, deliberate, and it resonated with the same cadence as a creature testing the bars of its cage. I ran to the lighthouse, heart pounding, and barricaded myself inside. Only when the tide returned did the sound cease. The telescope in the keeper's quarters remained untouched, always pointing to the horizon, as though watching for something. I never looked through it. Not once. I don't know if I could have resisted much longer. There were nights when I could swear I heard whispers from its direction, soft murmurs just at the edge of hearing. The worst moment came during a violent winter storm. The generator began to sputter, and the lamp's beam faltered. Panic took over. I raced outside, fighting against the wind, trying to stabilize the power. In that momentary darkness between flickers, I saw them. Massive, undulating shapes just beyond the cliff edge, rising from the surf, blacker than the night itself, drawn toward the absence of light. That's when it hit me. This wasn't a renovation. It wasn't a resort. It was a containment effort. The architecture wasn't ornamental. It was ancient, sacred geometry, designed not for comfort, but for imprisonment. The kelp beds, the foundation, the lighthouse itself, they were locks, chains, and the light was the final seal. I fled. As soon as the storm broke, I called in an emergency evacuation. I didn't care about the contract. I didn't wait for permission. I packed only essentials and took the dinghy to open waters, watching as the lighthouse faded behind me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd broken something by leaving. The official story was that the project was abandoned due to logistical challenges. My mother's treatment was mysteriously funded in full, and the intermediary was never seen again. I live inland now, far from any coast. I don't accept freelance work anymore. I don't talk about lighthouses. But at night, I still hear it. That faint, rhythmic scratching, like claws on stone, like something that remembers I was there. And I know the Isle of the Watcher isn't forgotten. The light still burns, not to guide, but to guard. And something in the deep is still waiting for it to fail.